Several of the most notable albums in the progressive rock genre, including some very early albums within the genre, fall into a category that has retroactively come to be known as symphonic rock, meaning music where a rock and roll band is backed or augmented by a string section or other larger components of a symphony orchestra. In this episode, I'm going to review several albums that are essentials within the symphonic rock genre. This is not a rank order listing of these are the very best, per se. There are some notable albums here that I'm not going to cover in detail, and I'm certainly not going to list these in terms of this is number one, this is number two. I'm deliberately going to list them chronologically so you can make some of your own judgments in that regard. But these are all records that I think, if you enjoy symphonic rock or if you're interested in exploring it, that you definitely need to give a listen to. Our first album is from 1967, Days of Future Past by the Moody Blues. Days of Future Past is something of an odd duck on this list because it's not organically a symphonic rock album. It's an album where the Moody Blues are playing on their own for most of the album with a small symphony orchestra, the Decca Records in-house orchestra dubbed the London Festival Orchestra, having provided interludes and occasional overdubs on the rock and roll songs. But it's definitely a notable album given its extensive use of orchestration, which generally was not done as extensively as it was in this album in the 1967 time frame. Decca Records in Britain wanted, with this album, to illustrate some of the recording techniques that they had perfected in the course of recording symphony orchestras and light orchestral music over the course of the late 1950s and early 1960s. One of Decca's biggest selling artists of that period was Annunzio Mantovani, who, prior to the days of the Beatles, would often have multiple records in the top 10 albums in both Britain and in the United States. Decca wanted to show, with the album that became Days of Future Past, that some of the recording techniques that were being used on albums like Mantovani's could be extended into support of pop music as well. What is interesting about Days of Future Past is that it represents a confluence of changes with this particular band. Prior to Days of Future Past, the Moody Blues were essentially a rhythm and blues band. But prior to this album, they had deliberately decided to abandon the rhythm and blues format and completely perform original material. They had also made two notable, indeed essential, personnel changes in the band. They replaced their original guitar player, Denny Laine, with Justin Hayward, and their original bassist, Clint Warwick, with John Lodge. Both Hayward and Lodge were excellent singers and great composers. And in joining the Moody Blues, they were joining forces with three other musicians, Mike Pinder, Ray Thomas, and Graham Edge, who were strong musicians and indeed solid composers in their own right. In addition to the orchestra, one of the key elements that was featured on Days of Future Past was the mellotron, an instrument of which Mike Pinder was an absolute master. Not only did he control it exceptionally well from a musical perspective, but prior to joining the Moody Blues, Pinder had worked at the company that built the mellotron, Streetly Electronics, and was intimately familiar with how the machines worked and how they could be repaired and their designs extended for use as a touring instrument. Pinder's knowledge of the instrument would be leveraged by many other bands of the late 1960s, most notably the Beatles and the Bee Gees. Days of Future Past was not initially a hit in the United States, and while it did reasonably well in the UK, it was not a powerhouse hit there either. It would not be until about 5 years after its release in late 1972 that the album would be reissued in the United States, and its keystone track, Nights in White Satin, again featuring the Mellotron courtesy of Mike Pinder, would become a major hit. The songwriting on Days of Future Past is very strong from all the members of the band, and in addition to Nights in White Satin, the album also features Justin Hayward's great song Tuesday Afternoon, and John Lodge's first contributions to the band, Peak Hour and Evening Time to Get Away. It's a great record that's definitely worth hearing. The next album on our list is Jesus Christ Superstar, recorded and released in 1970. We've covered Jesus Christ Superstar in some detail on this channel in a previous episode, so I won't dwell on it too long here, other than to say that while I know some of you probably are resistant to the idea of calling Jesus Christ Superstar progressive rock, I will argue that point with you all day long. Progressive rock is usually categorized as being music played by strong, if not virtuoso musicians who are leveraging more ambitious music forms than 3 or 4 chord rock and roll, including structures that come from classical and jazz music, and the usage of changing and in some cases unusual time signatures for popular music. Jesus Christ Superstar employs all of those. The backing band on Superstar, including the guitarist Chris Spedding, Alan Spenner on bass, and Mike Vickers on the Moog synthesizer, is a terrific and very solid band. And if you want to talk about odd time signatures, consider the fact that Yvonne Elliman's breakout song from Superstar, Everything's All Right, is in 5/4 time. The climactic flourish near the end of Ian Gillan's signature song, Gethsemane, is also in 5/4. And the scenes in the temple and with Jesus Christ on trial in front of Pontius Pilate are, for the most part, in 7. Sounds like a prog rock album to me. The next album on our list is Procol Harum Live, in concert with the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra, recorded in November of 1971 and released in April of 1972. We've done a full-length episode on this album as well, so again, not too much of a deep dive other than to say that this is truly an organically created symphonic rock album, where the orchestra and the band are playing together throughout the presentation, and indeed the orchestration was created by a member of the band's keyboardist Gary Brooker. The album is also a must-hear, and that is essentially a Procol Harum greatest hits album of its time. The album contains 5 songs, and 4 of those 5 are among the strongest songs that Procol Harum ever did: Conquistador, A Salty Dog, Wailing Stories, and In Held 'Twas an I. Of Procol's big hits, only A Wider Shade of Pale is not featured. Never understood why not. The next 2 albums on our list are solo albums created by 2 of the members of Yes. The first of these is from 1974, Rick Wakeman's album, Journey to the Center of the Earth. Journey is an outstanding record that, in some regards, it's a wonder that it was even made. Wakeman's label, A&M Records, initially resisted the concept of a symphonic album from Wakeman. Wakeman wanted to do it in the studio, and due to cost, he was told that he would have to record it live if he did so at all. The label was also not happy with Wakeman's concept of who he wanted playing behind him in the band, where A&M anticipated that Wakeman would enlist other current or former members of Yes to work with him. Wakeman instead chose a group of musicians, professional musicians to be sure, but musicians he knew basically from playing in a pickup band in a local bar. he turned this group of musicians into what would become his touring band for the next several years and created a terrific symphonic rock album. The album throughout its 40 minutes is engaging, and more than that, it's fun. There are some pieces of it that are deliberately done over the top by Wakeman to catch the audience by surprise and to bring the audience with him. My hearing the piece that starts side 2 on Journey, The Battle, complete with the choir singing about crocodile's teeth, lizard's head, as they go over what the action is with these two prehistoric monsters fighting each other, still brings a smile to my face. It's a lot of fun with a great band behind it and with a note of class brought by the narration courtesy of the English actor David Hemmings. Yes, it's over the top. A lot of progressive rock was. Next is, from 1975, Chris Squire's album, Fish Out of Water. Fish Out of Water is, to my ears at least, the one Yes solo album that could have been pursued as a Yes album and worked wonderfully. The music is majestic. Chris Squire and his keyboard player from his days with The Sin, Andrew Price Jackman, do a wonderful job of arranging the music. Jackman did the orchestrations on Squire's behalf and does a wonderful job throughout. And, oh, by the way, Squire is joined by some wonderful musicians on the album as well, including Yes's ex-drummer Bill Bruford, their current keyboard player Patrick Moraz, and King Crimson's and Camel's horn man Mel Collins. This is a must-hear, to be sure. Next, from 1976, is Renaissance Live at Carnegie Hall. Renaissance Mark II, with Annie Haslam and Michael Dunford, would make use of orchestration throughout the arc of the band. Virtually every one of their albums would include at least one, sometimes more, cuts that included the band backed by a string section, if not by an orchestra. The band pulled all the stops out with the studio album that they were supporting on their 1976 tour. That album, Scheherazade and Other Stories, included the title track, a 25-minute long opus containing 9 different sections created by various of the members of the band. So this was a true group composition that was exceptionally strong in both its presentation and its content. Scheherazade was, of course, included on Live at Carnegie Hall, along with many other of Renaissance's great standards that featured orchestration, including songs like Can You Understand, Carpet of the Sun, Ashes Are Burning, and Mother Russia. It's often said that live albums are an excuse to create a greatest hits album without doing so. Renaissance absolutely did that, perhaps unintentionally, with the Carnegie Hall album. It is a masterwork. It's probably, if you have never heard Renaissance before, the place to start. And at least in my opinion, if you choose to have only one Renaissance album in your collection, this is the one to have. It's wonderfully done. Probably about the only negative thing that the critics had to say about it at the time it was released was that the live performances, if anything, sounded too close to their studio renditions. In some regards, I think that might have been the point. This band was very capable of doing very complex work and performing it live and integrating it with the symphony orchestra. It's a great record, to be sure. The last album I'll discuss here is one that we've also covered in a previous episode. From 1977, Works Volume 1, from Emerson, Lake and Palmer. While this is not strictly a symphonic rock album, there is, of course, a lot of symphonic rock on Works Volume 1. Both Keith Emerson and Greg Lake in particular had been considering the release of solo albums prior to the notion of ultimately pooling their efforts into a combined effort, Works 1. And both Emerson and Lake at the time were very keen to pursue the concept of orchestration. Emerson in particular had done orchestral work previously in his tenure with the Nice, and having seen the success of some of the albums that we have previously discussed in our list, I suspect that Emerson wanted to be appreciated for what he could do in this realm as well. At the same time, Greg Lake was also interested in the concept of using orchestration behind his voice. Both Emerson and Lake, prior to Works 1, had considered building solo albums with these ideas in mind, and given that, we have some great work from the two of them on Works 1. Keith Emerson's Piano Concerto No. 1. Greg Lake's side of the album includes some great orchestral pieces, including Closer to Believing and C'est la Vie. And of course, the album closes with Emerson, Lake, and Palmer's great orchestral piece, the 13.5-minute-long epic Pirates. Pirates alone is worth taking the time to listen to this album. There are, of course, many other albums that I could have included on this list, and some of them I'll list here rather briefly just by name so that you're aware of them. John Lord of Deep Purple pursued orchestral projects on two notable occasions, including on Deep Purple's Concerto for Group and Orchestra in 1969 and in 1971 with his Gemini Suite, which also had participation from Roger Glover and Ian Pace of Deep Purple as well. Rick Wakeman's studio album that followed Journey to the Center of the Earth, The Myths and Legends of King Arthur, featured Wakeman working in the studio with an orchestra at last. And I mentioned Keith Emerson and his work with the Nice, encompassing orchestral backing previously. Their 1970 album, Five Bridges, is one that is definitely worth checking out as well. I'm sure I've forgotten some other notable entries of this type as well. By all means, feel free to list those in the comments. I'm curious to hear your reactions on this topic as always. By all means, please leave comments. I'll do my best to respond quickly. If you liked the episode, of course, please click on like. And if you haven't yet subscribed to Progpaganda, please do that right now. We want to continue bringing this content to you on a regular basis going forward. Thanks as always. You take care. Bye-bye.